this is a big deal, Cody, because we have our first ever in Revivl Media Studio guest, and it couldn't be a better guest than Emily, who has been super cool. Well, she's watched us put all of our equipment together, and I told her she gets to see how the sausage is made, and it's not very pretty. And she's been hanging out with us and very gracious with her time and letting us get everything put together so we could finally hit record. But the most exciting thing about this is we get to talk to Emily now, and her story, what we've kind of heard a little bit so far. We kind of did a pre-interview before we hit the record button, just because I was just already fascinated by her. This will be really fun to have her here and to get to let her use our little platform here to share her story. So,
absolutely.
Cody, I want you to warmly welcome Emily to the podcast.
Emily, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I hope you feel warm.
Not only did Emily come to do this podcast with us, but she also brought us sandwiches.
She did.
So I told her she already knows, the way to a man's heart. So
that's right.
We already love Emily. We're already really glad that she's here with us. And I think the best thing that we can do, you and I, especially me, is to just get to a point where I shut up.
Stop talking and let Emily tell her story.
And let Emily tell her story. So a little bit of background to Emily. Her parents are native from Spain.
From Spain.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And Emily has come over to America, living the American dream, went to school, studied a couple of different subjects in school, and then ended up kind of pivoting from what she studied and what she went to school for into another career.
Yes.
Had some kids along the way.
Definitely.
Had a husband along the way. And where she's at now is she owns her own catering company. Now, here's what I think we need to do before we forget. This is your chance to plug your catering company. We need to talk about your catering company.
Definitely.
So tell us the name. Tell us what you do. Tell the world what you want them to know about what you're doing with your catering company.
My company is Saucey's Catering. I actually founded in 2012. And I actually had been in practice a little bit before that, but I fell in love with the whole catering aspect of it. I picked up a lot from I worked for a whole different types of different catering companies as well. And so to me, it was something that I really fell in love with and I found my passion. So I decided to start my own. So in 2012 is when 2012 was when we were established, and I just went from there. So now I specialize in American, Italian, and authentic Mexican cuisine.
Nice.
We offer, a la carte services, customized services to all-inclusive services.
Yeah.
So I started out going, it was just a very small. I mean, I was cooking from my kitchen, and delivering, the breakfast, burritos and tacos and such, and so I've always had people tell me that my food was great. And so once there was a point to where it was time to make the change, make that decision. I went ahead and did that. And I haven't looked back ever since.
Oh my gosh. So I can't wait to get there and talk about that. But so Saucey's is the name, yes?
Yes, Saucey's Catering.
And it's here in North Texas area?
Yes. Our kitchen is located off of North Beach Street. Okay. So it's a great location, actually, because we hit all over the Metroplex. We are known to travel to Dallas, Garland, Capel, even to as far as Weatherford, Hicko. We've hit Austin for a few events as well. So just all over, basically, all over North Texas.
Yeah. But I would assume that your greatest accomplishment is that you are the official caterer of the Other Brothers podcast. Can we make that official?
We are making it official.
Awesome. Well, Emily, let's start with your story with your parents and being from Spain. So what can you tell us about that? How did you guys get over here? And then how did life start happening here in America?
Right, definitely. Well, my grandparents, and I've heard it growing up, the little different stories and such. So it just basically depends, but on the actual truth. But my grandparents came. There's been parts where I've heard that my dad is originally from Spain as well, and then that he was here, so there's some, instances to where it's like, well, was he born in Spain or was he born here,
I see.
but for the most part, my grandfather was a blonde, blue-eyed, very light complected gentleman, very tall. He was about 6 foot and up. He was very slender man, and he was more of like a rancher type. That's where he started getting his experience with like ranch hands and such. And so my family kind of grew up that way. My dad grew up with that. So I'm a country girl at heart.
Yeah,
I love that.
And he met my mother, of course, and it's a funny story with them. I call it the Spanish Brady Bunch. So he was married before, and she was married before as well. And his first wife happened to pass away at the time, and he had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, who are now my brothers and sisters. And my mom had 2 boys and 1 girl. So she came from it was a marriage that didn't work out. So she divorced. They met at a grocery store. And I want to
Nice.
say it was Piggly Wiggly.
Very romantic.
That's the
Yes.
best in the produce
And
section.
they probably. And they got together and, had me and my baby sister. So I call it the Spanish Brady Bunch. They, blended family, blended in. And all of my brothers and sisters, our siblings, we don't even say step brothers and sisters. We just identify each other as real brothers and sisters. Grew up, it was a hard life, my dad trying to be, the main provider for us, or, total of 9 children, and such. And so it became difficult. We traveled all of Southwest Texas quite a bit. He did a lot of, work in the ranches and such. So I grew up in the small towns like Brady, San Angelo, Sonora, Comanche, Del Rio. We have family there, and they're established there too. So we kind of grew up just a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah.
I love that. We were not in a well-positioned type of family, but when it came to the family involvement and love, it was there.
Yeah.
I could see how my dad and mom had a great relationship, and raising, such a big family, and they kept it together.
Yeah. So if you could choose between being the only child or having this huge family, would you choose huge family?
Yes, 100%. Of course, I could do without the whole wrestling and locking in the closet,
Yes.
and, the fighting
Sure.
such.
Yes.
But those are great memories now. When we have our get-togethers, my brothers and sisters, and do you remember when I did this to you? And I'm like, yeah, but I hate you for that.
Yeah. But the Latino culture is so family oriented too.
Very.
Which is very cool.
It's very family oriented.
Where do you fall in these siblings? Are you oldest, middle?
I'm second to the baby.
Second to the baby.
So I'm
you didn't have a whole lot of authority. Only for the baby.
Only for the baby. And, she came out spicy. So I really didn't have a say. I just happened to blend in. I'm like, okay, it is what it is.
Kept under the radar, minded your own business.
Pretty much, growing up, I was a bookworm. So I love to read. I love to study. And I think that's what kind of helped me as I got older and through my years, and even through all the situations and challenges that I've come about. And my dad was... He was an artist. He loved to draw. He loved to illustrate. He was a great storyteller.
So he was a rancher. Did all that hard work, and he also kind of had this artistic side to him.
Yes.
Oh, very cool.
He even eventually went into construction. Once we moved to Fort Worth, I was about 5 years old, and we established. And it's funny because I've known Jim Risky's. I don't know if you're familiar with Risky's Barbecue.
Yeah.
Well, we lived in one of his houses. So
we do not prefer them as our catering company.
No.
We prefer Saucey. Yes. But yeah.
And so we grew up knowing Jim Risky's, and a lot of his friends, very close friends. It was a tight knit. My dad, when he came to Fort Worth, he did a lot of construction. So he even did work for Risky's at his, homes and such. And we were a big family living in this, it was like about a 4-bedroom house and such. But we made it work.
Yeah.
It was in the smack dab middle of north side in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And, again, it wasn't the best home, but we made it. Just the love that my siblings and my family had, we made it a home.
Yeah. And
Sure.
there's some scary parts of Northside Fort Worth. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. But I think growing up at the time, it wasn't as bad as that it is now. It's gotten, a little Northside. You hear about Northside, and it's pretty bad now. But growing up, it wasn't as bad. I remember that. I would walk to school. I went to JP Elder Middle School. And so that's probably a few, I would say 1 or 2 miles from, the house or
Yeah.
such. It's a good track to go through, but I would walk alone, and to
Yeah.
school, from school, no problems, so it was scary, but I mean, you put on your big girl pants on and you take it, but you go for it.
That's what
But
Cody does every morning.
That's right. Don't talk to strangers.
don't talk to
Keep
strangers.
your head down. Just keep walking.
Exactly.
Well, very cool. What so high school, what was high school like for you? Were you in certain programs? Were you still a studious bookworm?
That's where it starts.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
So when I got to high school, I had met my first husband. It was right when I met him. And it was funny that he had a shop, a family shop right down from where I lived and such. So honestly, when I met him and such, I was in high school, and it was a turmoil, of events that happened, and I dropped out.
Okay.
I dropped out of high school. I had the opportunity to graduate early. I was in the gifted and talented programs all from elementary through middle school. So even when I was in 7th grade, I had the opportunity to graduate.
Wow.
I was, lucky enough to be blessed with enough, knowledge to go through that. Unfortunately, at the time, you had to pay certain fees and such, and my family wasn't well established to afford those.
Mhm.
Sure.
So I went into high school, and I thought, oh, this is my chance. But then, of course, little, me decided that no, the boys, look nice, and they
Sure.
talk a talk.
Yeah.
So that's when I met my first husband, and I just decided, you know what, I'm not going to go to school anymore. I'm going to, in the Latino community, there's, a lot of circumstances that the families, they think a certain way, the culture thinks a certain way.
Right.
And my dad was big on, if you touch my daughter, you stay with my daughter.
Mm.
And, he, the boyfriend, my husband at the time, he basically was a boyfriend, he went and introduced himself to my family, and my dad's like, oh no, he's like, and I happen to be very close with my dad. I consider myself a daddy's girl.
Yeah.
And it was difficult for us. It's where some of the turmoil and challenges came on. And I basically left. I moved in with him. I was in the verge of just turning 14.
Wow.
So yes,
And how old's the boyfriend?
He was 16.
Yeah.
So, he came from a good home as well. And to me, I mean, I was like, I was really mature for my age. My mom was severe, asthmatic, and she had other illnesses. So I was old enough at the time, and years prior to that, where I was old enough to cook and clean at home and go to school. And my other older siblings would work. They would go to school and work to help support, my the household. Since my dad was the only one really working and being, providing for the home. So I was just there at that point. So I was very, very mature for my age. And I thought, this is my chance to get away from it. This is my chance to stop being that way.
And you were in love with this boy,
and I was in love with him. It was,
14.
14.
Did you also meet at the Piggly Wiggly, or did you meet in school?
No, it happened to be where,
7-Eleven.
That was one of the times where I saw him, And it's funny because 7-Eleven was just right up the street from us.
So you mentioned that you moved in together. Did you guys have your own place, or did you move
we
in
moved
with family?
in with family, with his parents.
Yeah, but you're too young to get married, right?
It was a rough for me, because I was so used to my family, being with my family. And I was used to also, I mean, I did basically what a wife would typically do. I would help, since my mom was always in and out of the hospital, I would help my dad. I would get up with my dad. I would make him his lunches and set him up to go to work, and help my brothers and sisters with, their lunches, or getting the household ready to start the day. So I was so used to that, and as a homemaker, that's what I felt like I had to do. I didn't know anything else. So when I moved in with him and his family, that's all I did. Shortly after I got pregnant. And so mind you,
how old were you when you got
15.
pregnant? 15. Okay.
15. And so, it was, like I said, it was difficult because I miss school so much. And I felt like I let myself and my dad down. That I didn't graduate. So right before I had the baby, I decided I'm going back to school. I'm going to do this. And that wasn't he wasn't happy, my husband at the time, he wasn't happy with that. He wanted me to be, at home, stay at home and such. But to me, I felt there's more. I have a purpose. I can't, like, I just felt anxious being at home, and so.
Yeah. And the knowledge that you had this other human to take care of eventually,
Right,
does that motivate you in your direction of,
once
I
she
want to
was
better
born,
my
yes.
life for this child?
Yes. Once she was born, because it was on a daily basis that I would think, what did I do? What did I get myself into? I'm already with this guy, I'm pregnant. What did I do? I had so much potential, and I was my worst critic, at the time. I wasn't happy and he wasn't happy, because you start going through the motions of, there was other girls out there and other, situations. He's entering his party phase, and I was like, no, you married me, we're together, we're having a baby. And so I was ready to be, a housewife.
But to get to have a 16, 17-year-old guy
Yes.
buckle down
Yeah,
and dedicate to home family life is, I'm sure, a challenge.
You're asking a lot.
It was. And so my daughter came along, Marissa, and that's when I was like, I'm gonna do this. He was already basically had moved on. We were still living together, unfortunately, and he just had, other mindset, to go through. It's like he started something and then just gave up and moved on.
Yeah.
And it was difficult. I wanted it. I came from such a loving home and family oriented, and that's what I wanted. So I was roughing it out.
Yeah.
I was roughing it out. Unfortunately, as we got older, I started school. I ended up going back to school. I went and graduated from Trimble Tech. So I still graduated a year early.
Yeah.
So I still graduated a year early. And from there, I went to sign up for TCC, and they came back and told me, well, you can't because you're still too young. I was 17 going
Okay, so hold on. You're 17.
Uh-huh.
You still graduated school early, but how many years did you miss of school? Just the one?
It was
when you dropped out.
I was 14 when I dropped out. So 15, 2 years.
You missed 2 years of school.
Yes.
And still graduated a year early.
And I still
Incredible.
graduated a year early.
Incredible. So TCC says, we'd love to have you. You're just not old enough. You're 17.
Yeah, 17.
Yeah.
So they said we can get you in the programs if we have parental consent.
Oh, okay.
So I go back scrambling and I tell his parents, and they're like, well, we'd love to, but we're not your parents. And I'm like, but I'm living with y'all, my guardians,
Yeah.
So I went back to my parents. My dad, we had a rough relationship since, I left home. But he just seeing and hearing that I was willing to go back to school, and he's like, okay, let's do it. He signed the papers. I enrolled, and then I started my education, the prerequisites at TCC, and I just kept pushing myself.
Are you putting yourself through as far as financially?
Financially, yes. I didn't know anything about any type of grants or anything or scholarships of that nature. I just completely, my first job was working at a Save-A-Lot food store in River Oaks.
Yeah.
So I started, and it was a funny thing because I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to apply. I started out, I was barely turning 16 at the time, and I started out as a cashier, and within 6 months, I was already running the store. They had promoted me, and I was manager of the store.
You're already more mature at 16 than I will ever be in my life, which is interesting.
You're thinking that too.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, it's 16.
This is incredible. So you got baby Marissa.
Yes.
And you're going to school and you're working.
Yes.
Incredible. And I guess one of the kind of good things that came out of this is that you kind of rekindled to an extent your relationship with your dad and your family there. Mm-hmm. But what does your support group look like right now with the baby and school and work? I mean, who do you have around you to help you?
It was no one,
or
actually.
Just you.
It was just me.
Yeah.
It was just me. I had some animosity from his, from his side of the family, only because they also saw me as a stay-at-home person, stay-at-home woman. And because, again, in the Hispanic culture, there's a lot of families where it's like, yeah, once you choose your decision, that's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to be. But I was not ready for that. I pushed myself, and the more I pushed myself, the more I was able to speak up for myself. Yeah. And so that's what I did. I kept pushing and pushing, and they started seeing, I think I did have some support. Well, a lot of my support instead of just me. And I had his dad. Oh, he's an amazing man. And I still talk to them.
Mm.
His dad would tell me, I know this wasn't for what you for you at all. This wasn't supposed to be your life.
This wasn't your plan.
Right. And so he would, talk to me on the side and say, go for it.
Yeah.
Do it.
So he's a good mentor.
He was a very good mentor. He would tell me we all make mistakes. He's like, my son's not the best person. He's like, and I love him just as much as I love you.
Sure.
He's like, but keep pushing forward. So, and it was funny because there were some times like, because I lived with them, that's who I would turn to. I didn't want to tell my parents because I didn't want to see how bad, for my parents to know how bad the situation was. So I painted a pretty picture in front of them. Oh, everything's going great. I'm going to school. I'm doing this. But at home, it was very rocky. It was hard. And
where did you find the motivation, the energy, like the drive to keep going? I mean, you didn't have a whole lot of, I guess, around you besides yourself. So where did that come from?
Well, one thing that I do remember is growing up, my dad would always tell me, anything that catches your curiosity, find out about it, study. So I want to say that was a big blessing for me because even as I was growing up in school, that's why I had such knowledge and the education just came and flowed naturally to me because I had that determination. Anything I would study, or if I, read a book about frogs, well, I'm going to learn about frogs, And so I would take that approach. And I just did that, even with the situation that I was in with having the baby, and living in that circumstance, those circumstances. And it's like, no, I want to do something more. I want to study. And that's basically while I was studying and such, going through, I was working also. And I had spoken to a gentleman who had started the academy. TCC offers, police academy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to try it.
Okay.
I went in and I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I think in my
finally some authority.
Yes. I think in my other past life, I probably was, somebody big and, strong and, with a lot of authority. And it just it hit me. I loved it. I fell in love with it. I was still, again, going through the means. By that time, we had our own little house and such, but it was still very rough. I mean, he started, unfortunately, doing drugs.
Yeah. This is the father of.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So we were
because you mentioned before that at some point he was like, I'm out of here.
Yes.
But he was still in your life.
Yes.
Okay.
He was.
You're living together.
We're living together. And I think honestly, what really was bad was the fact that we listened a lot to well, y'all need to be together, and y'all need to be together for the baby's sake, y'all need to work it out.
Or divorce is looked down on or frowned upon.
And we were all Catholic. So that was another big thing. And so it kind of we still were, it was not forced, but it kind of felt that way to be together, to remain together. We were on baby number 2. By then I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's already gone through his phase.
Yeah.
He'll grow out of it.
But you guys are on different tracks. It sounds like you're going to school, thinking about career, thinking about life, the future of things. And he takes kind of another path. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Okay. And unfortunately his path was the horrible path. You know, he started doing lots of heavy drugs and such. And it started impacting, they're a family owned business, and it was impacting the family business. And it was definitely impacting, gravely our family life. We tried several times, we had our rental home and such, and it just wasn't working. He would come home at all sorts of times of the night. There were times where he wouldn't come home at all. And here I am, I basically felt like a single parent with now baby number 2, Brianna, and Marissa, and still going to school, still working, and it was tough. It was at that point, I thought to myself, okay, should I accept this? Should I accept that this is going to be my life?
Yeah.
And deep down inside, a voice kept saying, no, this isn't it. This isn't it. There were times that, sorry.
You're good.
But
you're good.
I would look at my babies and think, what kind of life do I want for them? And I thought it has to be a better life. Yeah. It has to be a better life. So I kept pushing because, I had in 1 year, I was like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go for it. I really didn't have the, the full support from the family again, because, I was very limited with what I would share with the family. And on the other side, I had him where he's like, you're never going to amount to anything. And, the drugs got a hold of this guy. He was a good guy and it got a hold of him. And it just.
Do you think that he saw you elevating your standards and your, I guess, drive, and he saw his reflection back to where he wasn't doing much and wanted to pull you back down?
That's exactly what it was.
Kind of to where he was.
That because he would mention it all the time.
Yeah.
He's like, you're gonna do well and you're gonna leave me one day. You're gonna leave me. He would mention that quite often, and I would tell him, well, change. You can change.
I told you you were gonna do that.
I know.
Cody
I'm
just
watching
kicked the
it.
wire.
Barely.
Sorry.
But
you were always encouraging to him?
I tried to be, I tried to, I would tell him, let's go to rehab together. I'll go with you, and such. And unfortunately it was just, he had such a hard life and his own mind was his enemy, basically, and with those type of people, you can't help them.
Yeah.
And I eventually learned the hard way that I couldn't help him.
So with the drugs and just the stress of the relationship and everything going on, things turn abusive at some point.
Yes.
Okay.
He got into more harder drugs. We were in our home in River Oaks, and I was going through the restroom closet, and I found some needles.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I actually was taking my two daughters a bath. They were in the bath time, having bath time, and I was grabbing some towels. And when I grabbed the towels, that's when they fell out. And it just.
What goes through your mind?
I flipped.
Because you knew he was. I'm sure you knew he was dabbling in stuff.
Yes.
Some stuff.
Yes.
But when you see the needles in your home.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really, like, it was a big punch, a hard punch in my stomach. I mean, I got down on my knees. I fell on my knees when I saw the needles, and it's like, is this where we're at now?
Yeah.
My babies, I just remember my two girls were splashing in the water and such, and I could see them, but I couldn't hear them because my mind was just completely elsewhere. And I was like thinking all sorts of things, like, number one, where did I go wrong with him? What is it, me? Because he was verbally abusive as well. Verbally abusive. I was to a point where I was having a low self-esteem.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, is it me? Am I the one that is causing him to be on drugs? And then I started thinking, or what is, is it him? Like, I know his mind is not right. So, I mean, I was all over the place.
But that negative energy can be so persuasive against you.
It sounds silly now.
Right.
But going through it, I'm sure, like you said, am I literally driving him to the needle?
Yes. And that's what I thought, for a good while, that's what I thought. And, my thing to snap out, it's like, okay, how am I going to approach this? Like, the first things first, get rid of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I started, I got the girls ready for bed. And once they were in bed, I ransacked the whole restroom, took everything apart to make sure there was anything in there. Because my thought was like, I don't want my babies to get hold of it. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Are you going through the academy at this point?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you go to your cop friends and ask for advice?
Own a pair of handcuffs?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
We don't need to go down that road.
Sorry. I apologize for Cody. But no, is your husband, well, are you guys married at this point? We'll just call him your husband. Yeah.
Yes.
Was he present in the home when you found this stuff, or?
No, it was one of his rampage days where he was out.
Gotcha. So you kind of have to plan and anticipate at some point he's going to come home.
Right.
He's going to discover that his drugs are not there. Right. And so what was that,
it was
process like?
I mean, I wanted to call the cops and put him in jail. I did. I'm like, I want to teach him a lesson. And then I thought, well, if I do that, what about my babies? What are they going to think?
Sure.
And me going through the academy, and I'm going through all of the, everything I've studied about what's right, what's wrong, what do the right thing. And you get pushed through a lot through there.
This is such a dichotomy,
man,
of law, of
morality, ethics.
And then it's so close to home, your own family, you have this dilemma.
Yes.
Wow.
It was so difficult. So I eventually I said, well, I'm going to wait it out. I'm going to just calm myself down, wait it out. I was the type that I didn't want to really show my feelings in front of my daughters. I mean, there were times, unfortunately, that they saw, some abuse, some physical abuse and such already by that time. And so I just didn't want it to be turned bigger. A few days passed when he did show up and I confronted him. And it didn't go so well, of course, and
he's not right of mind because he's using.
Right. And
is he rough with the kids as well, or just you?
He was a great dad. And I think that's why I stuck with him for so long. I stuck with him for 18 years.
He's a good person.
Yes.
So there's a sliver of hope that this could all go away and we could all go back to normal one day.
Yes. And that was what I was holding on to. That was my clothesline right there. I'm holding on to dry, hoping that it'll eventually get to that point. And it didn't, by then we had our I had graduated the academy. I went into the force. I loved it. It was some good stuff. But I did talk to my sergeant at the time and he's like, well, you do know that, because they would see some of the bruises. They would see some of the circumstances, I would have to call in, of course, and he knew, I shared quite a bit with him and he eventually said, well, you're not really going to be able to get ahead because of the situation of your husband. He had a record by then. So it was like, I was tied. It's like, well, I really I always dreamed of being like a homicide detective.
Sense to me. Why does the attachment to your husband have to dictate your success in the program?
A lot of it had to do not necessarily with, that, but the diversity of the fact that, because he, like I said, he had a record.
Yeah.
And, if there were circumstances, because
just assume you're going to be a dirty cop.
Yes.
Gotcha. Kind of conflict of interest.
Yes.
Type of situation.
And so to me, I wanted to avoid that. So that's when I turned, and it was short-lived, and I went into the corporate world.
Yeah.
And it was by dare. I had some colleagues to tell me, "Oh, you're not an office girl, because I loved it. I loved putting on the uniform every day, 17 pounds of all the equipment, and going out and about, and I love the interaction with everyone, with people and such. And so, but I had to make that decision. When I was already told you're not really gonna move to where you want to because of the circumstances. So
how big of a gut punch was that?
It was rough
because it sounds like you found your purpose. Like you just really fell in love.
I did. Oh gosh. And if I could be that again, I would in a heartbeat.
Let's do it. Let's all join the academy.
Yes.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay.
You get some good experiences in that.
But my guess is you always have this backdrop of your family, your girls.
Yes.
So you're like, I'm going to do what I need to do, right? To take care of them. Okay.
Definitely.
So you joined the corporate world.
I joined the corporate world. By then I had my son, and we had purchased our home. I thought, okay, it's getting a little better. I see some improvement from him, and he did. He tried making, some stances and making his way, and finding the right path. And unfortunately, he just met some old friends and went back at the old life again. This time it was very, very rough. As I joined the corporate world, I started from the bottom, moving my way up. I didn't know anything from corporate, here I am. I had business management degree, but what good would that do? I was in foreclosure, for Countrywide at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm just going to, wet my feet, see what I get into. And, it ended up turning me. I'm like, I like this, I can do this. And sure enough, the determination that I had and the person that I am, I always strive for more. I'm always, I want to learn more. My education is for me, so I would always ask the right questions, go to people. I'm done with my work. What else do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Or can I help you? Or why do you do what you do, Cody? Tell me about it.
Where did that work ethic come from? Do you think it came from the example of your dad?
My dad. Definitely. And so I would just get intrigued with learning more and more. And so within the corporate world, I moved up so quickly. I'm like, I surpassed all the small bumps and, of being, from team lead to whatever next promotional opportunity there was. And eventually we merged with Bank of America. So shortly after, I just pushed myself so hard that I became an executive.
Yeah.
So I was one of the youngest executives for Bank of America at the time.
Wow.
And I was thinking, this is it. This is my career.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do, and I was still struggling. Of course, the career life looked beautiful. It was set there for me, but home life was very,
Mhm.
very difficult.
Yeah.
I was still coming to work with bruises and such. It was times where I wouldn't sleep, under the circumstances that, I was living at home and going through with him, and it, again, like I said, it got really, really bad.
Mhm.
The last straw was when I almost lost my life,
Mhm.
and it was in front of my children.
Oh no.
So it just got to a point that I mean, I think one of my sisters, it happened at home. It was just a very bad episode of, physical abuse. And I was strangled to the point that I blacked out.
Yeah.
My sister, for some reason, stopped at the house and stopped it, basically.
Is that right?
Yes.
Just
So-
by
She
well, it's a
said-
blessing, obviously.
Definitely. I think
cut
it
you
was,
off. I'm sorry. What
no,
did she
no.
say?
I think it was God.
Yeah.
I really do think that, it happened. We were in the backyard, and my sister said that she was going to the mall, and we live by Ridgemar. So she's
Uh-huh.
like, she's like, something kept telling me to stop by your house.
Wow.
She's like, and so I did. And she hears the commotion of the babies crying. So she runs through the backyard. She runs through the backyard, and she sees him on top of me, strangling me. I'm already out at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So she just yells at him. And of course, he was under the influence of something very hard for him to be under that condition and doing that. So he just gets startled, gets up and runs. And the next thing you know, like, I just happen to wake up. I'm inside. Paramedics are giving me CPR. I'm bleeding from my mouth, my eyes, the blood vessels busted.
Well, Emily, do you remember? And you just tell me if this is too close to home.
Mhm.
But there was a point there where you thought this was the end of your life.
Yes.
Do you remember the thoughts you had? I mean, what was that experience like when you're like, I've got
Ooh.
a few seconds left? I mean, what do you think about in that moment?
I tried to fight.
Yeah.
I kept telling myself, this is not how I'm going.
Hmm.
This is not how I'm going. Like, it was a physical fight. He was on top, and he was a big guy, so he was on me, and he had his hands gripped tightly around my throat, and I'm still trying to fight. I'm scratching. I'm doing everything that I can.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking to myself, I could hear my babies screaming and crying, and I'm like, no, this is not. This is, I don't want this. It's not going to be this. It's not. And I started calling for God,
Mm-hmm.
And then all I know is that I just see his face was the last thing I see, is just, and I kept telling myself, I'm not going out like this. I'm not going out like this, but I think I get my stubbornness from my dad too. So when I come to, the paramedics have been working on me already, and I'm spitting out blood and such. And my sister was there, the babies and such. And she tells me, that's it. You're leaving him.
Yeah.
That's it. She's like, and she knew, because there were times where I would call my sisters, this happened or that. And there were situations where I would go and stay with them a couple of days or whatnot, because it was really bad at home, and take the babies with me. So she was aware of the situation. So she told me, she's like, this is it. You're done. She's like, you're not going back.
Yeah.
I grabbed what little we had, and I honestly, I don't remember the full night. So I don't even remember if I ended up at the hospital or not. All I remember is a few days later, I'm getting an apartment, and it's in the worst places of Fort Worth.
Sure.
But just where I can actually have somewhere to stay,
Do you think, Emily, with since you were so entrenched in this dysfunctional relationship,
Mhm.
do you see if your sister wasn't there to say, okay, I'm putting my foot down and you're
Right.
not going back, do you think you could have ended up back with him again? Or did you also, was that the end for you? I guess I'm asking this because, abuse is so, there's not a whole lot of logic to it, right? As far as the emotional connections you make, where there can be severe abuse, but you can still stay with that person.
Right. Mhm.
So did that, ever, do you think it really took your sister saying, all right, you're out of there, to make that happen?
I think it was that, but also me waking up to seeing the paramedics around me, seeing the circumstance that I felt like I put my children in.
Yeah.
I'm like, they shouldn't be seeing this. they shouldn't be seeing their mother in this state at any point in time.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was a combination of my sister was more of like, she reassured me.
Yeah.
That was a affirmation for me.
And I know that's such an awkward question because, of course, anybody listening is like, she nearly lost her life. Of course, she's not going to stay with that person.
Right.
But I would imagine that people have been, and I want to talk to you later, Emily,
Mhm.
about, kind of the encouragement that you can provide to anybody who's in abusive relationships. But I just know that there's people who are experience even similar situations and they stay and they
Yes.
stay. So yeah, sorry for such an awkward question, but I am interested in that.
And there were other circumstances where the abuse was fairly rough. It was, and I stayed.
Yeah.
And I stayed thinking that it
Well,
would be better.
You're trying to find safety, and
Right.
even if you go get your own place, what's to stop them from coming there?
Right.
It's hard to get somebody out of your life.
Yes. And that's exactly what it was. I basically went into hiding for about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
He was not happy. He thought that I was always going to stay.
Mm.
He had that mentality of, oh, she's always going to stay. If she's put up with all of this for so long,
Yeah.
she's going to stay.
And did he
But
make,
he's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
but he's simultaneously worried that you're going to leave him.
Yes.
Well, did he
So-
make the attempts of, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's never going to happen again. It wasn't me. We can make this work. I mean, did he plead to keep that relationship going?
Unfortunately, at the time, no.
Okay.
He was still using so bad that
Gotcha.
it was the opposite.
He was just not conscious enough to even attribute any energy to that.
No.
Gotcha.
He was so angry. He went and shot up our home. And this was after I already had went into hiding. The home that we had established evidently went into foreclosure. Like, I just completely left everything. Like, when I dropped everything, I just had a few clothes, and children just had a few clothes, and we were sleeping on air mattresses in this new place. And it was a place where not even his parents knew where we lived.
I see.
Wow.
I made that decision only because I didn't want any ties to the fact that if I tell someone, even my own family, he's going to find out, because they saw him as a family as well, so they would be willing to probably tell him where I was at, and I didn't want him coming back.
I am curious, with your kind of going back to your academy training and all that, at what point were you going to turn him over to the system with like a restraining order or a no contact order? Was that in your thoughts at all?
I thought that daily. I did. It was something that, at home, it would be like, this is it. I'm going to turn him in. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put a restraining order on him. And I did get restraining orders on him prior to, with other circumstances, and then it would be like, but I don't want to press charges, and sometimes
Sure.
it was from, a lot of family influence and involvement to where they persuaded me, like,
or I don't want to rip my children away from their father.
About to say, it sounds like your daughters.
Yes.
Daughter and son by this point. So that was my other
Yeah.
Or
question.
daughter and son, yeah.
Yeah.
How were they absorbing all of this?
My oldest, Marissa, she was in her early teens, preteens.
Okay.
So she saw a lot of this. And that was one of my main reasons I find when I woke up in that circumstance, with the paramedics surrounding me, and she's crying, and she even told me, Mom, that's enough. And my two little ones, Bree was like about 8, Xavier was 3 or so. And they were just, they kind of knew now, but not to the point of what Marissa saw, had witnessed.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of like what also helped me make that final decision is,
Sure.
I don't want them to ever see anything like this again.
Yeah. And that's been your pattern ever since you got pregnant at 15, 16 is, I'm living my life for my children.
Yes.
Okay. So you've been a fighter your whole life. Then you had the fight of your life.
Yes.
You've disconnected from that situation for at least a couple of years, going into hiding.
Was that your CNN audition?
What does that mean?
That was such a good headline.
What?
You've been a fighter your whole life, and then you had the fight of your life, right?
Yeah, I
wasn't even aware I was having momentum, and then you just stopped me.
I'm sorry, man. I was just so blown away by the train of Jer Bear.
Let me cook, as the kids say.
But
my goal is to make Colin cringe at least once an episode.
Just did it.
You just did it.
Okay. But honestly, you've been a fighter your whole life.
Yes.
Had the fight of your life. 2 years disconnected finally from the situation. Are you still working?
Yes.
Okay.
By that time, again, very successful. I had moved to Keller.
Are you having to keep this? Sorry, I'm just so fascinated by this. I'm just thinking, are you having to keep this from your coworkers? I mean, are they aware of this stuff? I mean, you have this life that everyone sees at work, right?
Yes.
They have work family.
Yes.
And they have no idea potentially
Right.
that you're dealing with all this stuff in your personal life. So does this get out? I mean, do they know?
They knew when I changed my name when I divorced.
Gotcha.
You know, by that time, again, I had even studied, you know, some, I kept on, I mean, I went to school for about 7 years, like everything, like my dad said, anything that catches your curiosity, go for it, learn about it. So
yeah,
I had, you know, in the back of my mind with all the circumstances that I had went through, you know, with my family, with him, I studied civil law as well.
yeah.
So,
I went to school for like 7 years, but just because I didn't know what I was doing with myself, I wasn't a good student.
I went to school for 10.
Are you going to UNT at this point?
Yes.
You've been going to classes at UNT.
And UNT. So I started studying a little bit about law. I had the opportunity to go to Texas Wesleyan. That's a great law school here in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it just wasn't in my budget, unfortunately. But I learned enough to where I was able to file my own divorce and do my own divorce, you know, the whole, you know, shebang of that, and no legal fees, it was just straight, you know, court costs and associated costs with that. And by that time he was working on himself.
Okay.
You know, I did have some episodes at, you know, at the corporate world where he would try to go in. We had security, of course. So, you know, that wouldn't work, but I kept my distance. You know, that's by that time we moved to Keller and we were living a better life. You know, it single parent, you know, of 3. My daughter by then was, you know, in her teens, mid-teens, 15, 16. So she started working and that helped, you know, a little bit and such.
Yeah.
But then I started getting all these opportunities within corporate, but I still, like, you know, you said, I had 2 faces, you know, I had the home life and then I had the Amley life. Once I did get my divorce, we were already separated, of course, and living years and worlds apart. And it was rough. I mean, he didn't want it. He didn't want to accept it. I knew I wasn't going back. You know, but I was scared that I would be persuaded to go back.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
What could persuade you, do you think?
Family
kids?
And kids.
Yeah.
Yes. The kids.
So he doesn't have visitation during this time?
He did. Even so, everything that I went through, I was still one of those that didn't want to take my kids away from their father.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, I would plead with his parents, at least please one of y'all be around. I don't want him to be under, you know, any using or under circumstances where it wouldn't be good for the children. But he worked with that. You know, he even was in his well mind enough to, when he saw the kids, he was good. So he was a great dad. I mean, and he's, you know, still had been, you know, for that time.
This is incredible to me. This is a man who was on top of you trying to end your life.
Yes.
But you still were able to harbor some compassion for him.
Yes.
How does that work? He's the father of your children. You come from a religious background.
Right.
You believe in a God or a deity. You believe that people have a spirit within them and that there is always good there.
Right.
Potentially. Yes.
Yes.
That's incredible.
That's what, I mean, you basically took the words out of my mouth. That's what I saw. You know, I always have given people the benefit of the doubt, you know.
And you provided him forgiveness at some point?
It took a few years.
Yeah.
But I did, you know, when I really found God, because
the only way we're getting to heaven is if we keep a relationship with Emily.
Yes.
And she gets us in at the door.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be greeting y'all with some sandwich.
That's exactly.
Yeah. You distract him with the food
There
and
you
we're
go.
going to sneak around
There
the
you
gate.
go.
Sorry for
But
interrupting.
no worries. But that's when I really found God. It was to a point because I mean, we growing up again, we were Catholic, full-blown Catholic. My mom was part of the church and stuff, in South Texas. And then we grew, once we got here, that she got, sick. It was hard for us to go. So, but we were still devout Catholics, as much as we could be. And so going through everything that I went through, I tried to be, I even tried, the children's ministries. Like I would take him, like when I was working on our marriage, we were part of the church. We tried everything, I was helping in the youth, minister the youth at the time and such. I still tried to be the good person that I wanted and was supposed to be, at the time. Unfortunately, again, he would strive. He couldn't decide which path he wanted to go to. So in corporate, once I was going through the life changes and I was finally settled, a home in Keller and such, we were doing good. That's when I made my decision. I said, I sat down one day and I started thinking through everything that I went through. It was just like a divine moment. So you call it, it's just like I started praising God and thanking God for everything that I went, that I was there. And, just I looked at my children and I'm like, man, I've made it. I've made it, and it was such a good feeling, to think back and, oh my gosh, I almost lost my life, or I went through this, or I was, I looked this bad with, all these, physical, circumstances. And here I am, I'm sitting down in my home, in the home that I own with my children, and I'm doing good. I'm like, thank you, God.
Incredible.
And ever since then, like
you were able to, at this moment, lead with gratitude.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And, I can say that day is when I really found God. Like I was able to say, you've always been there. Like there were times where I knew I wouldn't have made it, it was all him. It was all him. And, after that, that's when I'm like, I have to forgive. I have to forgive this person. He started, taking classes and doing what he, to improve himself. By then he had, his own family. He had another wife. He had another child. And I'm like, okay, I got to forgive.
Wow.
If I want to live better, I have to do it for myself. I have to forgive. And I took those steps, my oldest was like, no, mom, no.
Yeah.
She's like, don't. And because she had a hard relationship with him, like as she grew up and really understood what had happened, she just
was she worried this may open the door a little further to bring him back?
Yes. Honestly, she was.
And you and her siblings.
She was.
Yeah.
She didn't want me to see me get hurt again.
Sure.
Physically and mentally, emotionally, And so she refused to talk to him. But even with me showing that forgiveness and compassion and finding God, I kept telling her, you only have one father, whether he changes his life or not, but you at least made an attempt. And she ran with that. Wow. She had a good, she started rebuilding that relationship with him. The siblings, I mean, they always were all about him and such. And so again, he was a great dad,
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I'm like, okay, I have to forgive, I have to do this not only for them, but for myself.
Yeah.
Once I did that, it was just like everything lifted off of me.
Yeah.
Everything, it was just a whole new me. And I kept pushing forward. More blessings started coming around. I had the opportunity to live in India. I lived in Mumbai and Hyderabad.
Let's not skip over
that. Yeah. Hang on before you just pumped the brakes there.
For people who don't have interesting lives, when you say, yeah, and then I moved to India.
I decided to kick it in Mumbai for a minute. Well, before we move on altogether, I mean, it sounds like with you decide to recognize God's hand in your life for the good and the bad.
Yes.
And you didn't look at him and say, why the bad and not just the good?
Right.
But kind of accepted that, realized that he was guiding you the entire time.
Yes.
And that gives you the gratitude and the peace to now look at your life moving forward and realize he's going to be with me the whole time. He's been with me the entire time.
Yeah.
Yes.
here we go.
And anyone
It
who
was-
has a valid reason to step away from the idea of God, right?
Yes.
Because of all the things, the trauma that's happened in your life.
Right.
I think anybody who has the excuse to do that would be you.
Mhm.
Yeah, you have the license, but
Yeah, but
okay,
what?
Mumbai, can we?
Right.
Yes, yeah.
So, you know, in
I'll go on a
corporate,
tangent. So let's go to Mumbai.
So again, I was, you know, very successful. You know, the blessings just started coming in. I had the opportunity to go. I was one of the first, you know, from our division. So I was in the mortgage industry. So I hit it, and I'm like, well, what am I gonna do about my children? You know, Marissa was 16 at the time, and she's like, Mom, we got you know, the technology was coming in, so we had like Netscape or, you know, whatever you call it, you know. So she's like, we can video chat, Mom.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she's like, I'll take care of this. And I'm like, oh, 16,
Wow.
I don't know. And she's like, but the neighbors around us are great, they know us. I mean, we lived in a great neighborhood in Keller, Texas, so it just worked out, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
I knew, like, I was real good friends with the principal at my kids' schools and such.
And she
you
could
know,
always
so-
say, Mom, at 16, you were, you know,
Right,
practically
yeah.
married, living on your own, had
Yeah.
a kid. So come on,
Yeah.
I can do
And
this.
she would throw that at me. You know, she's like,
Use it
Mom, you
against
got to do that. So, you know, so,
Wow.
but I did, you know, I went to Hyderabad, India.
How long were you there?
1 year in Hyderabad and 1 year in Mumbai,
Wow.
Bollywood. So, and I opened facilities, you know, I was training and you know, and interviewing, opening these big and setting up the facilities and such there for what I did in our division. I loved it. I mean, it was a great experience. People were afraid when they would tell me, oh, you're going to a third world country and this and that. And I'm thinking, can't be any worse than what I've seen, you know.
True. You lived in Northside.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
There's no difference, you know, like the food might be better, you know,
Yeah.
who knows?
Yes.
But
Now, what were the Mumbai men like?
you know, they were like Hispanic men, like they are
Yeah?
very cultural. Like, if I could identify them anything close to, it would be the Hispanic culture.
Oh, okay.
Very humble, very hospitable. They, I mean, would offer their shirts off their backs for us, you know. Now, mind you, this was a nice side, of course, you know,
Yes.
but the Muslim men were a little bit different. We had rules, you know, when I went there. Don't look at Muslim men in the eye. Don't speak to them unless they speak to you first.
Mm-hmm.
Don't walk beside them. You walk behind them. Like, there were
So you had to learn this culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then of course they would say, don't eat any street food, any street vendor food. And I'm sure now y'all see videos all over the place that, you know, say why. But I was always curious and
Sure.
adventurer, you know. So I was always heading out to the market, you know.
Yeah.
I would get one of the, you know, my colleagues and say, I want to do this. And they're
Yeah.
like, are you sure? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
So I risked
You're like, I'm
it.
basically a cop. I can take care of
like
myself.
I risked it, you know. But I learned so much about the culture. I got to see beautiful, amazing sights. I visited a lot with the locals. I was picking up a lot of their dialects, you know, you know, because there's like 850 something different dialects that they speak.
Wow.
And so I picked up a little bit of Telugu, and I was able to, you know, have some little verbs here and there to where I would, you know, whatever I needed, I could get through past, you know, the language barrier. And I was fascinated with it. I just loved it. And then of course came back. I would visit, you know, holidays or short terms. I would take time to come back to the States. First thing I would do is, of course, visit with the kids. You know, they loved it, but they hated it at the same time because I would always get teased, Mom, you smell like curry. They're like,
awesome.
Mom, they're like, everything you bring from over there, it's curry, everything. You know, you just smell it, you know.
Yeah.
So, but you know, of course, then I would go back, and then I moved to Mumbai, and that was another interesting aspect of it. You know, Mumbai is a little bit different.
Did you fall in love with the cuisine there?
You know, it was very unique.
And does it have any influence on your catering stuff? I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of the rices and garlic. Yes.
Okay.
It was unique and that was in Mumbai, Bollywood, because Bollywood's more like the Hollywood of India and such. So, I mean, you would see these extravagant houses, and then right in between would be the slum, you know, and I would see whole families, the mother, the father, all the children completely naked, taking showers in the middle of the street, you know, or wherever there was running fresh water. That's what you would see, you know, and it was normal.
Mhm.
You know, it
that's
wasn't
crazy.
anything. Yeah, it was very different.
Do you think every American should go experience some other perspective of culture? Do you think
Yes.
that would
Right.
benefit
I
us?
100% agree. You have to, just to see what it's like. And then you come back and you appreciate America.
Can we tell our wives we're going to go to Mumbai to better ourselves?
Yeah.
We'll come back at some point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nikki, I know you're listening, so get it booked.
Definitely interesting, and you learn so much. You
Yeah.
do. Over there, a lot of Buddhism, you know,
Uh-huh.
was big, the Muslims, and then Catholic.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of Catholics out there too. A lot of my employees there in India were named, you know, Fernandez, Gutierrez, Ibarras, Marias, Fernandos.
Wow.
I was surprised, and I asked them, you know, I never knew this, but I had learned that the Spanish had also conquered, you know, India for a while, and that's where they, you know, started establishing those names and such. And
Okay.
so, you know, they took over and made their place and way there. And India has some that was that
That's
Spanish.
cool. So
Yes.
some of your culture was kind of adjacent to
Yes.
the
And
experience there.
so came back home, and shortly after, that's where I got another punch in the gut.
Yeah.
It was rough. The mortgage industry, the mortgage crisis, 2007.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep.
It hit. Unfortunately, being, you know, at the top level, you're one of the first ones to be outed. And
So you were punished for your success almost because you made your way up to the top.
Yes.
And
you
because of the
know,
industry, you were one of the
it's-
first to get cut.
Yes. And that right there was also a wake-up call, you know, because it's like you relied so much on your life that you're living, and mind you, you know, doing well and such, and you don't think about the what ifs
Yeah.
at all,
Sure.
you know, at that point. And that was a life lesson, it's within itself, you know, being let go, and then just, what am I going to do now, you know? Well, the good thing was this: when I started incorporating some catering, what I would do is, when I was home, I would tell my teams, you know what, in order for me to meet this month's quota, we're competing against this other team or this other division or department. I'll bring our food in. You know, we had the corporate card, so we can, you know, cater for
Food is a
anybody.
great motivator. Yes.
And so, but to me, I'm thinking, I love to cook. You know, I love to cook. I'd love to, and mind you, I did skip the fact that when I was in corporate and going through my divorce, I started working for the Fort Worth Cats as well.
The baseball team?
The baseball team.
Oh, cool.
Minor league. So I did a lot of their concession stands. When I was going through my divorce, I wanted to stay busy. It was either, my mindset was, you either, you know, go through the divorce and be
Yeah.
miserable, or spend money because you'll probably want, you know, just to compensate for that loss, or you can make money.
So you weren't actually on the baseball team itself. You weren't a
No.
catcher or a pitcher. You're-
No.
Although it wouldn't surprise me
No.
because you're so amazing. I'd be like, I would just be like, yeah, okay, of course she is.
So, but I got to meet quite a few of them, and I did, you know, a lot of their concession stands. I landed a good gig with Bobby's Fajitas.
Okay.
And they were big within the league there, you know, that they had a permanent stand there, concession.
How do you have to like try out to do concessions there? I mean, do you have to bring food and be like,
Well,
I want to do concessions here? They're like, well, we'll see about that. What do you have for us? I mean, how do you become a
It's
vendor
funny
there?
because you know, when I went in, you know, I really wouldn't share my story of my home life with many people,
Yeah.
especially because I always felt, okay, you're at a higher level. You never want to share anything that could be
Right.
misconstrued with anybody else, you know, and ruined, because in the corporate world, it's dog eat dog.
Yeah.
It's very rough, you know. I mean, you think you have friends, but you really don't,
Yeah.
because they'll use whatever they know about you against you,
Right.
just so they can move up and you're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
learned
you
that.
keep things close to the vest,
Yes.
chest, whatever.
Yeah.
Is it close to the vest or close to the chest? Do you know, Emily? You had 7 years of
Both.
school.
Yeah.
They use
It's
both?
And you've been to
Both.
India. What? How do
Yeah.
they say it in India?
Oh, I can't remember anymore.
I don't know. Maybe it's different.
Interesting
I was
question.
like, I know something, but it's not going to be the right one. So,
All right. So
but,
the crisis happens.
right.
2007, 2008, mortgage crisis.
How are you with God during that?
Yeah.
Since you're a religious person and you know you've had this spiritual awakening,
Uh-huh.
you get one more gut punch. Were you?
She's
You know
solid.
what? I found it as like, okay. I'm like, so what's in mind?
I've
What do you
trusted
have
you
in
before.
store?
I
You
can
know?
trust
Yeah.
you again.
I'm like, what do you have in store for me now? You know,
Yeah.
because it was, you know, I'm talking about all finances depleting immediately. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I had a severance package, but
Yeah.
I mean, after, you know, all the bills and such that you have at home, it goes quick,
Yeah.
you know. So
So when do you think so obviously you've kind of had this side gig or this passion with food.
right.
At what point do you consider like seriously like maybe I can pivot to that?
It was shortly after I was let go, you know.
Do you like how I used the name of the season in the question?
Oh.
Didn't like it? We'll fix it in post-production.
We'll
Dump some other word over it.
It was great.
Okay.
You did great. You did
Thank
great.
you.
And so it was something that, you know, I started liking just the you know, being able to talk to different people. You know, when I was working for the concession stands and Bobby's, it was a great feeling, you know.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
and
the corporate world is just such a soul sucker, isn't it?
it sure is. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice. You know, it
You
can
have
provide a great
consistency.
life. You have consistency.
Yeah.
But
It takes some of the color out.
It does.
But working with food and working with people and stuff, there's a lot of color there.
Yes. And so, you know, and that's where I got my idea of, you know, catering in-house to my staff. So that's why I'm like, okay, if I can do, you know, if I do this here, and I had a great mentor. Bobby, you know, was great. You know, he was really good about, because I would ask questions. I'm like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And this tastes is good. What do you use to use that? You know? And so he would tell me some of his insights and such, and he was very successful, still is to this day. So then when I did corporate, I'm like, okay. And I'm so used to always cooking big meals, because of course, when I was growing up, cooking for my family.
Yeah.
So to me, it was nothing being able to cook, adding an additional 50 plates, you know, and such. And so the team loved it. I would get all the time, why don't you start a restaurant? Why don't you open a restaurant? That started coming into my head, you know, and it was sitting back there. Once I got the, you know, the whole let go and the punch, you know, the punch in the gut, that's when I'm like,
nothing was holding you back.
No.
Yeah.
No, I had the little money from the severance, and I'm like, I got to do something. So I just started networking. I started going to businesses and saying, hey, do you have any lunches, or, you know, do you have any events going on within your day or your office that you would require any catering? And, you know, right away I met a big roofing company, the bowling alley, you know, in Arlington, other areas as well. And they're like, sure. And I've always been like, I did now is bring samples.
Smart. Super smart.
Very
So
smart.
I would bring samples in whenever I would do these quick office visits and such. And I landed a few gigs. Within the year, I started, you know, right away. I mean, I was getting calls. I had, you know, some offices within the Bass Brothers buildings, you know, in downtown Fort Worth, and I was doing their luncheons, you know. Shortly, a few years later, you know, I still was a type that I need to have something secured. So I went into the construction industry, and I started working construction. And I fell in love with construction.
Managing construction, or are you out there swinging a hammer?
No, I'm managing.
Okay.
You know,
that wouldn't surprise me either. Okay.
Yeah. But I can't, I'm pretty good at trowel, at masonry.
I bet you can.
I could do that. I could
What
lay
kind of
bricks.
construction are you managing?
It was actually full-blown construction. So I did masonry. So I started out from the bottom up again with masonry. I was a receptionist. Mike Blackburn was a saint. He was the vice president for Wilkes Masonry at the time. And he gave me a shot because he read my resume and he's like, you're going from an executive to a receptionist. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I told him, it's a whole different industry. Just give me a shot.
Did you bring sandwiches to him too?
I did.
So smart. So smart.
We've discovered her MO.
You know,
I'm going to start buying
my secret.
Yeah.
But, you know, I started feeding the office too. So as a receptionist, I would bring in breakfast and such, and they fell in love with that, you know. And mind you, I was still catering, you know, on the side. I had little gigs that I was doing, but I focused in the construction and masonry, and I moved my way up eventually. You know, they opened, Wilkes was very successful that they opened a construction division as well. So I started managing and operating the whole aspect of that. So business management degree, here I go. And I took over. I helped with a lot of set the foundation for the construction company.
Yeah.
And
real quick. Because in your bio, when you were going to school at UNT, you also studied computer science?
Yes.
Okay. Just add one more notch to your belt of things. Did anything ever come from that?
You know, well, I was the IT loved me in corporate because they never had to do anything for me.
Right.
I would just tell them, hey, I put in a ticket, but don't worry, I took care of it.
Yeah.
And they were like, let me see what you did. And so I
Yes.
would show them and they're like, okay, you're good. Bye.
Yeah.
We're closing the ticket. So I was really well known in corporate for that, and I would teach a lot of my staff, any little glitches that they were having, with technical issues or technicalities, I would assist with that.
But was that your major, computer science?
It was.
Okay.
It was, and I was fascinated with that too. But again, going back to what my dad had said, whatever catches your curiosity, learn it, go for it,
Okay.
So I did. And I always carried that in the background. And to this day, I still am able to get things done at home. I don't call anybody,
You're just so well-rounded. I mean, you're just so educated. I think that's really cool. Okay. So sorry,
No,
that just
good.
popped in my mind. So the catering stuff is starting to take off.
Mm-hmm.
You're working for the construction company.
Yes.
They obviously love your breakest burritos and whatever
yes,
else you're serving
lunches,
there.
everything. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
there's momentum builds and builds.
Yes.
Okay.
And it continued to lead. I saw myself, okay, I'm always going to have a primary, considering, the fact that I was a single parent. I needed to ensure that I had insurance for the kids,
Yeah.
And I knew what I wanted to do with catering, but I just wasn't there yet, and I think the mentorship that I had, because I evidently was being able to mentor with several different catering companies, top-notch catering companies. I even did the Dallas Cowboys galas, so I got to see their uniform unveilings.
Yeah.
I met Randy White.
Remember when the Cowboys were really good?
Oh yes, I miss Tom Landry.
Let's not talk about
Let's
it.
not talk about
That's so
Was that
cool, though.
30 years ago.
Don't worry about it. He's a Seahawks fan. I said let's not talk about it.
I
And
just
here you are trying to
talk
dial
about
me
it.
up.
He's putting that little button.
All right. Next year's our year, though, right?
Yes.
Cowboys.
Well, I don't know, because I'm an Eagles fan now. So.
Interesting.
Yes.
Who's trying to dial who up now?
That's fine. I respect her so much that I have no problem with that. I'm a very reluctant Cowboys fan. I just happen to be, when I was growing up, that's when they were winning Super Bowls all the time. So now I think they're a joke. Anyways, they weren't a joke when they hired you to do some of their events.
Right. So it was just a lot of the experience that I was gaining through that. I still had my primary and I loved it. And then to a point, I was able to talk with Mike, and I catered some of his personal events.
Yeah.
I catered some of, even when all of the field staff would come in, I was catering all of their luncheons. So he was being supportive of me. He eventually had told me, I know what you're going to do. He's like, you're going to leave me. And he's like, and I'm happy that you will.
Where does all your energy come from?
I don't know. I don't know.
I can barely make a sandwich when I get home. But he's
Palace sandwiches, expert in like 8 different areas, always smiling.
I swear, I think, the day I die in my funeral, I'm still going to be directing everything and probably making the food. So.
Perfect.
But
at some point, I guess, do things take off to where you're like, all right, I have to make this decision. I can jump 2 feet in now.
They did.
Okay.
They did. I was blessed enough that I met my current husband, and he was very supportive.
Did you also bring him sandwiches when you met him?
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Are you surprised?
The system
I was
works.
bringing him lunch and and breakfasts and stuff. We started dating shortly after. He figured I could cook, and that was the end for him.
Smart
That was
man.
the end.
Very smart man.
So we married and such, and I was still working for Wilkes and still doing catering. I talked to Mike, and Mike's like, I support you 100%. He's like, if you want to, go ahead. So I left Wilkes for a while and full blown catering. We were blessed enough that I hit the ground running. I already had the experience from all the other catering companies, the mentors that I had. So I was able to establish my business fairly rapidly. And I also had the opportunity, even prior to that I met, it was a great person and mentor, and she gave me a lot of ins and outs of what to do. And her big thing was decor. She used to be a caterer for Oprah Winfrey. So she came from Chicago.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And she mentored me, and she showed me all of that decor and displays. She's like, she goes, there's food that could be crappy, but if you have a great display, that's going to attract. And so I thinking to myself, I'm like, my food's not crappy, sister. I'm sorry. But, it was just fascinating to learn that, because I was always on the other side, and once I learned the decor and the displays and the buffet setups and such, I'm like, I got this.
Wow.
And again, I left, the construction industry and went into that. And I mean, we were great. God was great to us. We got a home, we had cars, the kids were, we'd had vacations.
You found your Spaniard?
Yes,
Is this,
yes.
You referred to your husband as your
Yes,
Spaniard?
as my Spaniard. And he's from Madrid. I
Yeah.
learned shortly after, I always thought he was a white guy, because
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to Mexicans anymore. I'm going to white guys. A funny story. It's going to be sidetracked.
Yeah,
Funny story.
good.
So I meet him, and I think he's white, and I introduced him to the family, and me and my sisters are talking crap. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy over here, this the bolillo, we're going off in Spanish, and I'm thinking he doesn't have a clue what I'm saying.
He knows Spanish.
And so, he's like, I would look at him, and he's like, smiling, and I'm thinking, yeah, girl, and they would be like, well, does it at least take you on great dates? I'm like, yeah, he's pretty good. He's even taking me, like I'm telling him.
You're having these conversations, and you don't think he knows one word of what you're saying.
Nothing, because all he would do is just
sitting there
smile,
smiling.
Yeah. He's smart.
So,
he's waiting to see where this goes.
Yeah.
So one day we were on a date, and we bump into one of his work, friends, and it's a little Hispanic guy. And he's like, oh yeah, Adam, he starts talking to him in Spanish, ¿Cómo estás? And blah, blah, blah. And Adam, my husband, starts talking to him back in Spanish. I'm like, to see the look on my face.
What a brilliant guy. I wonder how long he wanted to keep this.
Oh, I know.
This secret,
power he had. It was a few months, let me tell you, because, oh my gosh, I'm like, flabbergasted was not even the word, so to speak. I'm just like, the whole color of me I was pale, and he finishes the conversation, and I'm looking at him, and he smiles, and he's like, oh yeah, I speak Spanish.
That's incredible.
And I'm like, I hate you.
Let's start playing the long game.
That is
the amount of patience he had to.
Oh my
god, is incredible.
That's great.
You do know that I was always joking with my sisters. I had to put on a show for them.
Yeah.
And he's like, sure. Okay.
Immediately backpedaling.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, so what do you want to eat now? I'm like, what's your favorite meal? Trying to sweep myself into there, But it just, he supported me 100%. We were very successful. We, went into the wedding industry, and that was scary. You always hear all these scary stories about the wedding industry. And there were some hard, difficult ones that I learned through. They really challenged me, my business, and even my train of thought. I mean, it was hard. It was difficult because you think that you're providing as a caterer, you're going to provide the best service possible, but your best service is still not good enough to some people.
The bridezillas.
Yes.
Yeah, we can say it.
And the moms.
Yes. And the moms.
Yeah.
And the moms, because there's some mothers that never had their wedding, dream wedding. So therefore, so to speak, they're living it through their daughter's wedding and such, or their sons. Mm-hmm. So it was difficult, but we managed through it, and we've been successful ever since. I held on. My husband, it was another gut-wrenching punch. We were doing an event, and he kind of like bumped his head and kind of disoriented and fell down, and I told him go sit in the van while we finished the event. I didn't know that he had a stroke.
Oh, wow.
He was 39 at the time, and we didn't know this, so I finished the event. He's not feeling too good. He sleeps it off. The next day, I'm going to the storage, going to the kitchen, putting everything up, and I'm doing this alone. And I'm thinking something's wrong with him, because he's usually my backbone. Mm-hmm. I go back home, and he's like, almost in a fetal position, and he's like, I can't move. Mm-hmm. So I'm starting to I'm like, stop playing. I'm pulling on his legs and stuff, and he's yelling, I can't move. I can't move. I'm like, should I call 911? And he's like, I'm really close to my oldest brother, Sam, so I contacted him, and I was like, what do I do? This is a situation. And he's like, call 911. And then by that time, my husband's coming out of it, and he's like, I'm okay. And I was like, was it a bad cramp or, some muscle spasms, So at that time, my brother his wife was ill, my sister-in-law. She was in the hospital. So we went to go see her the next day. Now, mind you, that was on a Friday night that he, felt ill. Saturday was the day that I was out and about. That happened to him. Sunday, we went to go see his wife. And so at the hospital, and they would always kid around and stuff. And his wife's like, she was basically in her deathbed. You know, she wasn't going to make it anymore. We were all accepting that, you know. So she basically tells him, you need to go get checked. Don't end up like me.
Gotcha.
You know, that same night we go to the emergency room and he has to have emergency surgery.
Wow.
His main aorta ruptured. And so he basically, if we would have waited 15, 20 minutes longer, he would have not made it.
You can't mess around with that.
So that started the whole challenge of us moving again.
Another divine intervention.
Yeah.
From a sister or a sibling.
Yep.
That's incredible.
So we then and I thank her every single day. I mean, shortly after she went home into hospice and passed away. And it was rough because not only was I dealing with Adam, I was also dealing with her, you know. And like I said, I'm still really close to my brother and his family. And, you know, I always promised her, I'm going to take care of him. I'll take care of my Bubba, you know, I'm going to take care of him. So their son, they only have one son. And I told her, you know, I'm like, I'm going to watch him like he's my own, you know. So, you know, I just stayed close with him and still managed to, you know, work through with Adam, you know, his situation. And that started years long of several surgeries for him. We found out it was by a blessing of one of the ER doctors that had first seen him. And she said, this isn't normal. He's 39. He had a stroke. He has a ruptured aorta. Something's not right.
Yeah.
She on her own time did, you know, her in investigating and found out that he had Marfan syndrome. Never heard of it. Didn't know what it was, but she educated us so well. She came back and said that it basically is, Adam is 6'4". So it's very rare, but it happens when, you know, tall people happen to grow so rapidly. Their skeletal grows rapidly, but their internal organs can't catch. They don't grow as quickly. So it starts stretching. And the more it stretches, like the main aorta, it starts ripping. It's like a rubber band.
Oh, okay.
So that's what happened to him. And he was at the point that he had several ruptures throughout. He had aneurysms.
But he's 39. I mean, you stopped growing in your early 20s.
I've never been more happy to be 5'10".
You're still looking forward to it, I know, but up until this point he had no other symptoms. I mean, this never was a thing.
None. It wasn't. I mean, he's always been, he's
so it
never
gets at
gotten
39
sick,
but enough
nothing.
wear and tear and just age on the organs.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was in 2018, and ever since 2018 until the last year, he's had to have surgery, major surgeries, open heart surgery, a chest. He's been open all over. Like he looks like, I call him Frankenstein because he's just had cuts all throughout and scars everywhere. But he's a fighter too, you know, and he's pulled through and he's made it. You know, this last surgery that was last year in March, he was supposed to have one, which was the final repair, and unfortunately he developed a hematoma over the repair and it squished his aorta, the area, and he started having another, you know, like a stroke attack, so to speak. And I got to see that happen, you know, because I mean, I was with him when he was coming out of his first surgery, and he just looks at me and says, just know I love you. If I don't make it, just know I love you. So I'm like, okay, God, I'm like, I followed you all along. You've pulled me through everything. If this is what needs to happen, I'm leaving it in your hands. But I didn't stop praying. I kept praying. He went through surgery. He came out. They said, you know, they were able to help him. He did good, but he wasn't better. And I could just tell. He couldn't even speak to me. He was intubated and such. And we lasted a whole month in the hospital. You know, he after that second surgery, you know, they said that they had to schedule another one to repair the fact that, you know.
Emily, did you ever have any moments with all just the history of the heavy things that you experienced? Did you ever have any moments where you just broke? Where you just exercise those feelings and were you just the strong person this whole time?
I would take time and I would cry. I would just hard cries.
Yeah.
You know, in the cars or alone. You know, mainly.
You do that every day.
Yeah.
before his coffee.
Exactly.
But
Just in the car on the way to work.
How did you deal with all that stress? I mean, did you, obviously, I know that you have this relationship with God and this spiritual aspect to things, but what did you employ to just manage your stress?
Praying.
Yeah.
Praying, talking to him. I mean, it just, anything that would come up to my mind, like, okay, if he dies, what if he dies? I would ask myself that question, then I would ask God that question. What if he dies? What am I going to do? And it's just, I would answer myself, or he would answer me. You know, it's like, it's going to be okay. Like, you've made it this far. You've come and surpassed so much. This isn't it.
Yeah.
This isn't it. I hear it often.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what really pushes me through. This isn't it. You know, when I'm facing that black door of heaviness and hardship, I hear that phrase, this isn't it. That means that I'm going to walk through that, even if it's dark, but I'm going to come to light.
Wow.
And that's what gets me through.
Yeah.
That's what gets me through. And as I prayed that time, you know, the third surgery happened, and I just kept praying and talking to him. And, you know, I mean, sometimes I would think I was crazy. I'm like, am I really crazy? I'm like, what if there's not even a God and I'm over here just talking, you know, out of, you know,
I think that's normal to question those things,
you know,
right?
and I would think that, and it's like, but I'm like, if that's what's getting me through this, even if there's not anything, a higher being out there, then at least I'm getting through
with it,
you know?
Yeah.
So I did that. And he came out of surgery. Everything went well. We lasted about a month in the hospital. He thought it was just, when he woke up and came to, he thought, oh, it was just one surgery. It wasn't until later that I told him, oh no, like, you flatlined, you know, you were gone, you know. And he's like, no. And the doctors had to reassure him, yes, you've been through a rough road and you're making it. And that actually was his last surgery that he had to take. He was fully repaired after that, you know. Just the doctors, Dr. Brinkman, Plano, shout out to, you know,
shout out Dr. Brinkman.
To Dr. Brinkman, you know, at the Plano Heart Hospital, you know.
Yeah.
It was just amazing, him and his team that they did, you know. And Adam now is just, he's working, he's, you know, doing great. He's being the pain in the butt husband that, you know, he typically, you know, is.
Isn't it cool
Good
that,
man.
you know, the way that God often answers our needs or prayers is through other people.
Yes.
So as you've been sharing your experiences and stories, there's always some person that's tending to you in your situation, whether it be a family member or Dr. Brinkman happens to be the one that you get connected with.
Oh, I've had so many angels.
So that's a good message to those who are kind of dealing with, why aren't my prayers being answered?
Yes.
And why aren't I directly having my problems fixed? Well, it's in my experience, and in yours, you can probably manifest that too, is that he's working through other people to tend to
100%. You know, there was a time where I would question myself and say, why don't I see that? I mean, I was jealous. When I was heavily involved in the church, I would, you know, hear all these testimonies and stories of people. And then I hear God, or you know, he told me this, or I felt him this way. And I would be jealous. I'm like, I don't hear nothing, you know. I'm like, I don't feel that. Or what's his voice like, you know? But I later on did succumb to the fact that it was other people. Like, he would send other people, messengers, you know. There was always somebody there to give me that confirmation that it's going to be okay, you know, that he's there. And I mean, I've met so many in my life, you know, that it's just, I think that's what really has me believing more in him, is the fact that, you know, people say, oh, you know, how can you believe in someone or something that you can't even see? But I do. I see you. You know, I'm talking to you.
But you have seen him through the acts and services of other people, and through the connections that he made to your life. That's incredible.
Yes.
So how is the Spaniard today?
100% better. Like I said, he's being the pain in the rear. He's back to normal.
Good.
You know, he's working. He's, you know, he still tries to help me in catering. I've been blessed enough to where I don't have him involved. You know, I have my team, my staff. You know, at one point when we were the first time that we were full blown catering, we had up to 52 contractors.
Wow.
And then of course that we were set back with his surgeries and such. We started COVID, we took a hard hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I still work through it, you know. And again, I always had a primary. And just last year I can finally say that I retired at 45 from all primaries, and I'm back into catering 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is
Amazing.
awesome.
Yes. You know,
Amazing.
I retired from having any additional, you know, job. Now catering is what I'm doing
Yeah.
100%. And
That's
we've been
amazing.
blessed. We've been blessed. It's picking up. I've landed quite a bit of good gigs, you know, with corporations, and, you know, and of course the other brothers. I'm a single
Yes.
caterer.
Yes.
Now, is Saucey's been recognized
I will-
anywhere? Any awards?
Well, I
Yes.
will print off a certificate
Okay, good.
that does
Definitely.
say
It solidifies
official
everything.
caterer of the other.
Yes.
We
Yes.
do need some art on our walls with their little bear, so that will be the first thing we hang up.
Yes.
Is that certificate?
But yes, we were recognized as we've won several, you know, awards from like the Nod and the Wire, Wedding Wire, those types of within the wedding industry. But we were named number 2 caterer for DFW, all of DFW,
That's
in the Star
awesome.
Telegram last year.
Wow.
So I've been in
Number
some
one better watch their
magazines.
back because
I'm
we're coming
telling
after
you,
them.
I'm telling
That's
you.
right.
So
I wouldn't get in her way.
No.
so we have, you know, and the accolades, you know, include that, of course, and then being on some magazines as well. I continue to network and just, you know, and I'm the type that someone new comes along and, you know, is wanting mentorship. I'm going to mentor them, you know, I'll give them, you know, my ins and outs of that as well. But not just on catering, but life in itself.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've had that quite a bit too, where I bumped into some women out there and that have gone or going through the abuse or a hard relationship. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, now you have this, what I would consider a responsibility that you probably want to wear, to where you can comfort and minister to other people because of your life experiences. You know what I mean?
yes.
Like, because
Yes.
you've experienced all these things.
Yes.
It's different when, you know, I've had a pretty easy life. And so when I know when someone is sharing like really heavy, hard stuff, I do the best I can to offer some, you know, some solace and but I don't have those same experiences, that
Right.
same depth of those
Mhm.
experiences. But you have these experiences,
Right.
so now, you know, I was speaking of God and purpose and things like
Mhm.
that. He can now leverage you,
Right.
right? You've been through this
Mhm.
refiner's fire with him.
Mhm.
And so you can share that with other people, and that is meaningful to them.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
incredible.
And I find myself my husband's always telling me, he's like, man, I can't take you anywhere because you start meeting people and then you become friends. He's like, you know, but it's just, you know, that, you know, the blessing that I have, that I'm able to speak in those terms and understand people, relate, you know, I'm able to relate a lot with people and such, you know, and with my customers and clients, I always treat them like family, and, you know, they love that. They love that, you know.
I just love that food is such a gesture of love.
Oh yes,
You know what I mean?
it is. It
so
is.
you can channel that
Yes.
to people and
Yes.
connect love that way too.
And just know, if you're ever coming over, you're going to be fed. So don't eat prior. Don't eat prior, because, you know, I've had that, you know, and it's funny because even my grown kids will come over and they're, you know, they've already eaten or whatnot. Have you eaten?
But you haven't eaten this good. So just,
and I was like, well, you remember, or I tried something new. I infused this, tried this. And they're like, okay, Mom. You know? So, but food is my passion now, you know. I really, and it always has been. I tell people it's my therapy, and it really is. Even when I was going through all those hardships, there were times that instead of crying it out and just feeling sorry for myself or sitting in the corner and being a victim, I would, you know what, I'm going to cook me some good enchiladas, you know, I'm going to make the best enchiladas that I've made, and I'm going to perfect this, or, you know what, I'm going to, you know, make some chicken Alfredo. I love Italian. So, I've learned to master all of the Italian sauces from scratch. So, you know, and it just, I would do that. I would really focus on the food. And then it was my therapy, because I would get me through it. You know, I was able to channel all of the negative thoughts and such, and I would just remove them, because I was now focused on food.
Yeah.
See, it's all choices. She made the choice to go into sauces instead of meth. Both are cooking.
Wow.
Both are cooking. One
Can
is
we-
a drug, one
Can
is
we
a
add
song.
some context to your comment just now?
No,
Okay.
I'm still talking. I make you so nervous. I
do.
love how nervous I
You're
make
so
you.
abrasive. She's just such a sweet woman, and we're talking about love and her passion and whatever.
And then I just
you
hit her with
invoke
crystal meth.
You associate sauce with. It was a genius association, I
The
guess.
whole cooking
Thank you.
aspect,
Cooking.
right? I
Cooking,
got you. I
right?
got you.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
like,
so
you're.
Emily, have you ever tried meth? Is that your
No,
next question?
no, that is not my. I will ask my own questions.
So sorry.
Your ex-husband had some issues with drugs
Right,
and what
yes.
else not, and
Mhm.
it's my guess is he had some stuff going on in his life that
Right.
hurt, and drugs was the easiest way to take care
Right.
of that.
Mhm.
You had some hard stuff going on in your life.
Right.
Drugs is also a very easy option, but rather than going that route,
Oh my gosh, incredible! I
You
see it
just-
now. I see.
He
it.
has his own
you
method. is that right?
decided.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just got to give you a chance. I mean,
Yeah,
you just,
let me cook, Jared. Let me cook.
Oh. Well,
You poured yourself into cooking.
Yes,
I'm proud
definitely.
of you.
Thank
That's
you.
the point I wanted to make.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't
No,
have
it's okay.
interrupted. Yeah, you do make me nervous when you invoke meth, and I don't know where you're going with it. But this whole time, you had a genius way of putting it all together.
How often do I? You know what?
Too often.
Let's move on.
That's
I
okay.
apologize to the listener.
No. What I wanted to ask Emily is, it could have been a totally different world where we don't have this crisis in 2007. You've elevated yourself to the top of the business world. You could
Right.
still be working in that environment, do you think? I mean, in the corporate environment?
Yes.
So it took some tragedy. It took some
Mhm.
things being pulled away from you
Yes.
that led you eventually to find your passion.
Right.
So, what do you have so many things that you could mentor people about or talk
Mhm.
to people about. But I guess when it comes to, we'll just talk about career. What advice do you have to people who are like, I'm working this profession. It provides well for me. I mean, technically I have a good job,
Right.
but I've got no passion for it.
Right.
What advice do you have? I mean, I guess it was kind of forced upon you because some external force made it happen.
Right.
But do you have any advice to those people who still want to find their passion?
Just it's okay to be out of your comfort zone. To me, that's how I see it now. It's that you get so comfortable and being miserable, but making money, or you know, doing something that you really don't want to do, but it's life or it's a living. It's okay, to get out of that, mindset and comfort zone. Sometimes you have to, and it's not by choice. Unfortunately, that was my circumstances, not by choice, but I don't regret it.
Yeah.
I don't regret it. My advice to people is that find what makes you happy. I always found myself in the kitchen cooking, even if it was in corporate or whatever, job I was doing, I was cooking. I mean, in the construction industry, we even moved offices and they made a bigger kitchen just so I can cook for them, So to me, those were hints. Those were, hey, this is really something you got to look into, and do. If that niche is there for you and it keeps, grabbing at you, go for it. Don't wait on it.
I don't think you should quit on your tap dancing desires and dreams. I think you should.
I'm going to
continue.
commit right now to go tap harder than I've ever tapped before.
You do that, pal.
You never know. Might be the next Shirley Temple.
You never know. I mean, with the curly. Anyways,
Whoa.
I'm hogging all the questions. This is an amazing gift for us. So what
It
else
is.
should we be asking?
The fun thing about Emily is every time I have a question, I just let you talk for a minute and you answer it with your next breath.
Wow.
So I haven't had to ask a lot of questions tonight.
Is that a slight dig against me?
No.
So I keep asking questions, and
No.
if I would just be quiet, she would answer them.
No, I'm just saying that's how it's worked for me. But the fact that you brought it up maybe shows
Do you
you're
have
a
any
little
relationship
sensitive about
advice
it.
for Cody and I?
As far as like in marriage or together or
Just our friendship.
Just as friendship.
In marriage, we're not.
No, I'm saying like, your own marriage. I don't know,
We're married to this podcast.
Yes, we are.
That's a great thing. That's a great thing.
Divorce is not an option till death.
No,
Friendships, I think, right now I have great friendships in my life. It's just a matter of consider them blessings. You're gonna have. It's never going to be a pretty one. for sure. You know, sometimes you're going to have that friend, and I do have one like that, and she knows who she is. But she's very direct, and it's okay. You know, sometimes I was almost afraid of her because she would be very direct, you know, and she'd approach it and say, "Have you thought about this? Or do you know about that?" And I'd be like, "No." And sometimes, you know how they say the truth hurts,
Yeah.
but the truth is the truth,
Right.
you know. So it's always good. It's to be true, you know, to that. Be true to
the
that
truth.
friend, yeah,
Yeah,
to the
to the-
truth, you know. And that'll really build a beautiful relationship, friendship, you know. I call her a sister now, you know, and it's just that's what it is, you know. I've told her my story, and she's been at Alt and such, and she had, you know, a different background, you know. She's a retired in the Navy vet.
Wow.
And so, you know, she's shared some of her stories and such, and we're great friends. And I have other friends too that we've shared, you know, some great stories and such. But we're always true to each other. You know, we hold that truthness to each other, and I think that really means a lot. You know, when you're honest with each other, and
Together. So I do have a question,
Mhm.
and I see the timer, so maybe we ought to.
Oh wow, we're just having such a good
We
time.
are having a
Just
good
flies
time.
by.
So I guess my final question, Emily, would be: you've got a platform now, you got a microphone.
yes.
So 2 minutes to tell the world whatever you want. If you had one final message that you wanted to share, what would that be?
Listen to yourself. Listen to your heart. Listen to your mind. Sometimes, you know, your worst enemy is yourself. You know, you're so hard on yourself, but you have to listen to yourself. You know, you have to listen to what's really, you know, whether if it's something bothering you or something telling you to take the next step into something, you know. But for me, that's what it was listening to myself, because you have friends, you have family, and everybody can give you any advice. You know, they'll give you so much advice that you don't even know what to do with it. But then it comes down to you. What do you want to do with it? You know, and to me, that's what I tend to do, is listen to myself. You know, sometimes and I not only mean just, you know, verbally, but physically as well. I know when I'm tired. I know when I'm getting tired. I know if I've taken on too much of catering, because sometimes I do. I'm known. It was very hard. And it still is for me to say no, you know, but I have to. And 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 I start listening to myself saying, okay, you take on 3 events. 2 of them are big ones. One of them is small. Yeah, you think you can handle it, but can you really?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. But do you really want to? No, you don't. You know, so you have to have those small talks with yourself, you know, and it makes a world of a difference, because you're starting to take care of yourself. You know, you tend to worry about everyone else that you're not worrying about yourself. You know, and when you listen to yourself, you take that time to love yourself. You know, you take the time to realize, hey, I'm overworking myself, or hey, I'm overthinking, or I'm worrying too much. You know, because I'm the type of the person that worries about everyone. You know, someone brings me their sob story or something, and
Sorry, I love people.
I was just stretching.
it was hitting them. It was hitting them.
It was.
And so it's difficult, because I would worry so much about someone else, but then what about me? What about myself? So I would say always listen to yourself, you know, and talk yourself through it. You know, it's, you know, it might sound crazy sometimes, you know, if you're answering yourself, that's a whole different story now, but
Sure. Well, that's beautiful advice.
I do.
You know,
I love that.
Emily, this whole podcast, and the premise of it really is to give people hope,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And you've been incredibly eloquent in providing that to people. I mean, you've been so gracious and so lovely with your story, and so vulnerable.
Mhm.
My final question, I promise this will be my final question. What message do you have for those who are looking for hope, or are not sure that it's there?
Don't give up. Don't give up. Whatever you do, don't give up. You could fall hard, and you're going to scrape those knees, and you can bleed, but don't give up, because there is something better. You're going to get through it.
This isn't the end. I
And
think
this isn't the end.
Yeah.
That I still live by that. This isn't the end. And this isn't it.
Wow.
This isn't it. When you're going through that hard time or rough patch, keep telling yourself, this isn't it. because it's not. I mean, you wake up, people tend to like, oh, they have a bad spell or a negative spell, and then, oh, I've given up. No, this isn't it. And then they wake up and they're like, oh yeah, I'm okay. So you have to tell yourself that this isn't it.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and being just such an example of being resilient. And
great advice.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
amazing. We have to have you back on sometime.
Oh, definitely.
You don't have to bring sandwiches again, but you're more than welcome to.
No, but he's saying bring some enchiladas or fajitas.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest.
Tamales.
The first thing I'm going to do after I walk you to your car and say goodbye and give you a hug is I'm going to sample your sandwiches.
Dig it. Well, I can't leave until I see the reaction.
I was about to say,
We'll take
a
some.
good cook wants to see how you
Yes,
react to their
yes.
food.
We'll take some B-roll. So how do people get in contact with you for catering for Saucey? It's Saucey's, yes?
Saucey's, yes. Yeah. And Saucey's is derived from my mate named Saucey.
Oh, cool.
So you can contact
anybody
me.
who has a wedding coming up,
Yes.
or a corporate event, or anything that could, food would be a good thing to have there.
Yes.
Are there too
Saucey's.
many people
Saucey's.
for an event?
No.
Okay.
We handle all sizes.
Okay.
All sizes. One of my first events was one of our biggest ones, which ended up being 500.
Wow.
And
Oh,
I
wow.
was a small one-man band with just, my kids to help. So, but if we were able to take that on, we can take on any. So
There you go.
How do they find you? Do you have a Facebook page? You have a
Facebook
website?
page. We have a website, Instagram, TikTok. I'm on
Perfect.
all social media. It's Saucey's SAUCEY 'S catering.net.
Perfect.
So
Why are you talking to us? You don't have talking privileges.
Right?
Sorry, listener.
Who
of you,
invited
right?
this guy?
I don't know. You've been shunned. Well, everyone, go find Saucey's. Contribute to the continued success of Emily, and I know her food is just as lovely and spicy as she is. Does that work for a commercial?
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you.
thank you
you,
guys. I
Emily.
appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank you.
that.